Hey everybody, and thank you for watching another video. My name is Merge, and welcome to the Breaking Bad What If series that I call the Heisenverse, a series where I make a change somewhere in the Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul timeline and see how that one change ripples out the entire universe. And in this video, we're revisiting an old scenario that I did cover before, but we're going to look at it from a different angle, and that is from the episode Dead Freight. Now we all know how that episode ends with the tragic death of, spoiler alert, Drew Sharp, rest in peace. But in the very next episode, Walter was going over certain options that they wanted to kind of test out. And one of those options was to dispose of Todd.
We dispose of him.
And that is what we're going to be covering here today, but we're going to be covering that during the episode of Dead Freight, basically right before Todd pulls the trigger. And once I get into the story, you're going to understand exactly what I'm talking about. But if you could leave a like on this video to support the channel, I'd certainly appreciate it. And how about you just comment down below your favorite Todd Alquest quotes? And there's not many of them, but for the ones that there are, they're pretty good. But let me know down below your favorite Todd quote, and let's just go ahead and get right into it. While Todd, Jesse, and Walter are celebrating the heist going well, Mike would be the first to notice a young boy pulling up on a dirt bike as he watches through a sniper scope. Then Walter would see the boy, followed by Jesse, and finally Todd. And since the train pulled away, they no longer had their earpieces in to hear Mike, who is trying to tell them that the kid didn't see anything because he just got there. But while he's watching from almost 200 yards away, he notices Todd going in his waistline. And as much as Mike is trying to warn him to stand down, Todd continues to go for his weapon. And Mike would make a split-second decision and pull the trigger before Todd can brandish the gun at the young boy. And to Walter and Jesse, they would just hear a shot fired and Todd's body fall right in front of them. And seconds later, the little boy would start his bike and ride off as fast as he could, clearly being scared of the gunfire. And Mike, thinking on his feet, would quickly get into the dirt truck that Kobe was driving, and he takes it to where Walter and Jesse are, and they get Todd's body, and they drive off to get rid of it the only way they know how to, with a barrel and a couple gallons of acid. And after Mike assures them that the kid did not see the heist, the three of them monitor police scanners for days, and to their surprise, not even a mention of a shot being fired in the area, as well as zero police presence as well. It's as if though the kid just pretended that he didn't see anything, which, let's be honest, I think the majority of us wouldn't say a word to anyone about what happened, mainly because the first thing that you're going to think about is, if I tell my parents what I seen, they're not going to let me ride my dirt bike out in the open desert anymore, which is a whole nother conversation to be had because what, Drew Sharp is maybe like 14 years old and you're out in the open desert where literally anything can happen, but I digress. So after a week of surveillance, they choose to go back and dig up the tank of methylamine with no issues, and they really start to cook. And after a few months of these fumigation cooks, they make millions in the process, and nobody feels bad about what they had to do to Todd, especially Jesse considering how much he loves kids. So in this scenario, the falling out between Walter and Jesse doesn't happen, and they do what Walter said about doubling down. But what stays the same in this story is the police tailing Mike because of his connection to Gus's men in prison. And even though Mike is making really good money, like really good money, he decides that he's made enough and he's the only one with enough sense to know when to call it quits. But with a third of that methylamine belonging to him, Mike would call Jesse and Walter for a meeting to tell them that he's out and is planning to sell his share of the tank, and would ask them if they're interested in selling their share and being out too. But immediately, Walter is against this idea and only wanted to grow his empire. And to his surprise, Jesse sides with Mike saying, "Come on, Mr. White, we can sell and be out by tomorrow. I mean, seriously, yo, what don't you have?" And Mike and Jesse both look at Walter waiting on his response, and he says to the both of them, "I am not selling out." And Mike would then say, "Shall we vote?" Then saying as he raises his hand, "All in favor of selling?" And Jesse would slowly raise his hand saying, "Come on, Mr. White." But Walter would just stand in front of them not saying a word and keeping his hands to his side. And Mike would say with a slight smirk, "Looks like you're outvoted, Walter." And with a 2-to-1 vote, Mike would reach out to Declan where he would arrange a deal where they would sell the tank of methylamine for $15 million. And with the meeting set for the next day, the three of them would leave the office with the tank of methylamine inside. But Mike, knowing Walter, he would circle around and park his car around back and would just wait. And 2 hours later, just as he predicted, Walter comes back trying to take the methylamine for himself. But when Mike catches him red-handed, he calmly holds him at gunpoint until the next day, until the time of the deal, ensuring that Walter or the tank goes nowhere. But just before the deal, that same day, Jack and his crew had been on the lookout for Todd, who they haven't seen or heard from in months. And knowing where he worked at, they pay Ira a visit to find out where he is. And when he doesn't talk, they beat him until he tells them about Saul Goodman, but before they leave, they kill him. And when they get to Saul's office, Kenny shows up wearing a bulletproof vest and holding an M16 rifle, forcing Huel and Francesca to stand there helplessly at the door while Saul is confronted by this lunatic. And he is demanding to know what happened to Todd, which to Saul, obviously he wouldn't know about. And just like Ira, he's beaten within an inch of his life, for which Saul would say, Okay, wait, let me call my PI, he'll know where he is, trust me. And he makes a call to Mike and he puts the phone on speaker saying, Hey Mike, how's it going? What do you want, Saul? Mike says bluntly. I was just wondering if you heard from Todd recently, because there's some people here who are really worried about him. Saul says, trying to be cryptic and also trying to remain calm with Kenny pointing a gun at him. And Mike pauses for a moment thinking back to what they did to Todd, and he would say, I don't know your clients on a first name basis, but I can track him down if you send me the information. And as he's saying that, Mike stands up in the office getting ready to leave. And Saul says, I'll send you a text in a few, because like I said, Todd's real close friends and family are really worried about him. And hearing that, Mike remembers that Todd did have an uncle who had prison connections, and he thinks that Saul might be in trouble. And he says to him, how about I just come by and get the information? I'm not too far away. Yeah, come by as soon as you... But out of nowhere, the phone call ends, leaving Mike to assume that something happened to Saul. And he would be correct in assuming that, because over in the office of the criminal lawyer known as Saul Goodman, he now lies in a bloody puddle with a bullet right between his eyes. And not just him, but Huel, Francesca, and whoever else was inside the office when Kenny came are all now dead. And before Kenny left, he would have taken Saul's phone so he can have a direct line of communication to Mike, who he thinks is going to give him the location to where Todd is. But what he fails to understand is that Mike Ehrmantraut is no ordinary private investigator. And since the phone hung up, Mike's already been working on a way to track the phone's current location. And it would take him less than 3 hours, and not only does Mike have the location of the phone, which is located in a compound just outside the city, but also the news of what happened at Saul's office makes it to the media. And seeing the footage of what happened at Saul's office, Mike and Jesse are consumed with guilt knowing that the person that was looking for them settled for Saul, Huel, and Francesca. And since then, Mike's phone's been ringing non-stop for nearly half an hour, but he ignored every single call. And once he was prepared, Mike hands Jesse a gun, and the two of them leave to deal with the neo-Nazi gang. And he even considers bringing Walter along as well, but he decides against it, remembering the problems that are associated with Walter. So while him and Jesse are out on their way to Jack's compound, they leave Walter tied to a radiator. But unlike the original, Jesse witnesses Mike tying Walter down, and knowing the scientific brain that Walter has, Jesse would remove the coffee pot nearby, preventing Walter from escaping the zip ties while they're gone. While on the road headed to deal with Jack and his crew for what they did to Saul, Mike prepares Jesse for what they might be going against, which is a heavily armed group of guys who want blood. And Jesse says, well, so was the cartel, and look how we took care of that, he says, loading up his gun. And Mike glances over at Jesse with a look of pride, then focuses back on the road and continues to prep him on what they're going to be going up against and what they're going to do when they get there. And meanwhile, over at the Vomino's pest office, Walter White is still bound to a radiator, unable to free himself from the zip ties, no matter what he does. And yeah, that's about what he's doing. Then back with Mike and Jesse, they make it to near Jack's compound where the tracker is showing where Saul's phone is, and they're able to make it to an area that has a nearby cliff face, and Mike begins to set up his sniper rifle, taking aim right at the gated compound. And once he was set up, he tells Jesse, make the call and tell him where we are. And down inside the compound, Kenny, Jack, and the rest of the crew are all talking about where they need to look next to find the private investigator. And at that exact moment, Saul's phone begins to ring to everyone's shock, and Jack would be the one to answer the phone saying, yeah. And Jesse would be on the other line saying, hey bitch, I hear you looking for me. Well, how about you come outside and tell me what you want. Then the phone hangs up, leaving Jack and his crew to get ready for war. And once everyone was outside, Mike starts to take aim, and once he had a clear shot, he begins to fire. And one by one, the entire crew is picked off, with Jack being the last one standing. But when Mike clips him in the chest, he's only saved by the bulletproof vest that he's wearing, but he manages to crawl himself inside the compound to avoid gunfire. And once Mike seen that the area was clear, he and Jesse quickly climbed down off the cliff face and drove over to the compound, even driving through the gate, not too dissimilar when Jesse made his escape during the season finale. And as Mike and Jesse are walking past all the dead bodies, they go inside the compound to see Jack on the ground holding himself up by the back of a couch while he smokes a cigarette. And when he sees Mike and Jesse, he would ask, are you gonna do me like you did my nephew? He says, blowing smoke from his mouth. And Mike looks down at him and simply says, yeah, before pulling the trigger and killing Jack right in front of Jesse. And after combing the area to make sure that there's nothing or no one else around, Jesse goes to get a gas tank from Mike's car and begins drenching the place in gasoline. And before leaving, Mike and Jesse burn the compound to the ground along with the bodies of Jack and his entire crew. Back over at the Vomino's Pest office, it's been nearly a full 24 hours since Mike and Jesse left Walter there. And at this time, Walter's being waken up by the sound of the office door opening. And he sees Mike and Jesse coming in carrying duffel bags, and they drop one of the bags right at Walter's feet. And Mike says, "Here you go, Walter. Enjoy retirement." Because after Mike and Jesse left Jack's place, they went to meet up with Declan, who came to meet with them at the office to take the tank and give them the money. And after everyone was paid, the three of them go their separate ways and officially closing the doors of the Vomino's Pest Fumigation office. For the past few months, Mike and Jesse has been considering leaving town, mainly for the fact that the DEA is still tailing Mike, and even after he's put half of that $5 million on this guy's books, he just feels that it might just be best for him just to get away from everything. And for Jesse, he wouldn't mind starting over himself, and whose footsteps better to follow than Mike's? So after being able to track down Dr. Caldera, he was able to get a copy of the vacuum repair card, and after being told the secret password, Jesse and Mike arranged for a meeting with the disappearer, and that same day, they would both leave town together while Walter stays behind in Albuquerque. And after a couple of weeks of Walter trying to enjoy his retirement, he really doesn't have a choice in the matter, because even if he wanted to start to cook again, he only has Lydia to provide him a source of methylamine, but he doesn't have Saul to launder the money, or Jesse to help him cook, or Mike to handle distribution. So all he can do is be angry at the fact that Mike and Jesse left him behind. But while in front of Skylar, he would give off the facade of being happy with his retirement. And that same weekend, while they're out barbecuing and enjoying family time with Hank and Marie, everything changes when Hank goes to use the restroom and comes across the Walt Whitman book, Leaves of Grass. And just when Hank was about to give up on his pursuit on finding out who Heisenberg is, him finding Gail's signature in the book reignites his drive to want to put Walter away. But the only issue that he's running into is that he has no one that he can trust that would believe him. The 9 guys are fully paid off with their hazard pay, Jesse and Mike are gone, Saul and Todd are dead. So at this point, it's just Hank's word against Walter's word. And unlike the original where Hank confronts Skylar and tells Marie, this time around, the only person that he confronts would be Walter. And similar to the original, he admits nothing and tells Hank, "Hank, even if someone believed you, there's no evidence to your claims. No evidence, no witnesses, you have nothing. So what's even the point?" And Hank responds by punching Walter in the face and kicking him out of his garage. And Walter leaves with his head held up high, knowing that there's nothing that Hank can do. And as much as it eats Hank up on the inside, he knows that Walter's right. But that doesn't mean that he's going to stop trying to find something on Walter. But that search puts Hank in a position where he's not even finishing the work at the DEA. And because of this obsession, after 2 months, Hank would eventually be demoted and suspended for not performing his duties as ASAC. And on a random Tuesday, Hank would be called by Walter to meet at a restaurant, and Walter simply tells Hank, "You need to stop, and if you won't listen to reason, maybe you'll listen to what's on this disc," he says, sliding it to Hank. And before leaving, he says, "If I hear one word of my name being associated with Heisenberg, this will be leaked to the public, and I may get in trouble, but you're going to be the one that truly suffers. ASAC." Then he leaves Hank in the restaurant to think about what he was just told. And after viewing the DVD, which is just Walter basically pinning everything on him, and when discovering that Marie paid his medical bills with Walter's money, he realizes that there's nothing he can do but let Walter get away with everything that he's done. And it wouldn't be more than 3 months later when Walter ends up in a hospital because his cancer's gotten worse. And while he's on his deathbed surrounded by his loved ones, including Hank and Marie, and because Hank never told Marie about Walter's secret, Hank's forced to be there to support his in-laws. And there's a deeper conversation being had with Walter and Hank where there's no words being spoken, but Walter knows that he got away with it and there's nothing that Hank can do about it. And when Walter takes his last breath, he dies in a hospital surrounded by everyone who's important to him. And oddly enough, that does include Hank. And a couple days after Walter's funeral, Skylar gets a visit from Kubi, who's carrying a duffel bag filled with cash, and he tells her, "This is your husband's last will and testament. You have $5 million in this bag. Do with it what you want. But as for me, I was never here. Take care of yourself, Skylar." And after going to her room to look at the money, a part of her wants to just leave and start somewhere new. But she refuses to sell the home because even though Walter was a literal monster, she loved him, and this is all that she has to remember him by. So over time, she'll launder the money into the car wash profits and continue to work as a cashier, never having to worry about money again. And since Hank never confronted her, she has no idea that Hank knows who Walter was. and even after his passing, he chose not to confront her about it, and at this point, it's just too late for him. So Hank just has to live with his failure of never being able to catch Heisenberg, and eventually, he'd learn to let it go and get back to his work as being the ASAC of the DEA. But when Steve Gomez approaches him with new signs of the blue meth popping up, his search for Heisenberg may not be over just yet. Hey everybody, and thank you so much for watching this video, and I really hope you enjoyed another story from the Heisenverse. And I know when it comes to ideas, they may be very few and far between, but trust me, I have a really long backlog. But as far as these other ideas where I'm kind of looking at alternatives to my alternatives, well, those are pretty fun to tackle, mainly because I've already been there before, so I'm just making some more adjustments to what's already been done. And in all accounts, it does make some pretty good stories, but that's just me. But now I want to hear from you guys. What do you guys think of this story? Did you like it? Is there anything that you changed, and what is the next what if idea that you would like for me to cover? Whatever it is, let me know down below in the comments and I'll do my best to respond. Until then, my name is Merge. Later.